Long, long ago, in a land far away, lived a wealthy merchant who had fallen in love and had lived happily for some time with his wife and their beautiful baby girl. And although the years had been kind to the merchant's family, in health, wealth, and love, things had suddenly changed. On the eve of the child's 8th birthday, her mother had become gravely ill, and a home that had once been filled with joy, love, and laughter was now grey and dark. As the woman lay on her deathbed, she called her daughter to her side and said, "Dear child, I must leave you now, but I will look down on you from heaven. Plant a little tree on my grave, and when you want something, just shake the tree, and you shall get what you want. I will help you in time of need. Just remain pious and good." She then closed her eyes and died. The child cried, but did as her mother had asked, planting a little tree at her mother's grave. For 2 winters, it was the child's tears that had watered the tree as the little girl recited over and over in her head her mother's last words, "I will help you in time of need. Just remain pious and good." And while the words comforted the poor child, nothing could prepare her for the storm that was about to arrive. After the 2nd winter, when the little tree's leaves had turned green, the child's father had finally returned from his business overseas. The little girl was ecstatic to see her father, who had left her alone with the servants since her mother's passing. But to her surprise, the child's father had not returned alone. "This is your new mother and sisters," he said. A stepmother who already had 2 daughters by her first husband. They were beautiful to look at, but in their hearts, all 3 were proud, arrogant, and well, just plain wicked. All seemed good for the first week, until the little girl's father announced he was off to sail for another business trip. The little girl couldn't help but notice the loss of love, laughter, and light that once flamed in his eyes. Now he was just a shell of the father she once knew. In spite of this, she begged him not to go. "Mind your new mother," he said. "She will tend to the business of the house and make sure you have everything you need. I love you, little one, and be kind to your sisters." Within the week, he was dead, a violent storm that had laid his ship to rest at the bottom of the sea. It didn't take long for the stepmother to show her true colors. "What is this useless creature doing in the best room?" she asked. "Away to the kitchen with her. And if she wants to eat, then she must earn it. She can be our maid." Her stepsisters took her dresses away from her and made her wear an old grey skirt. "That is good enough for you," they said, making fun of her and leading her into the kitchen. For years, the poor child was made to do the most difficult work. She had to get up before sunrise, carry the water, make the fire, cook, and wash. To add to her misery, her stepsisters ridiculed her and then scattered peas and lentils into the ashes, and she had to spend the whole day sorting them out again. At night when she was tired, there was no bed for her to sleep in, and so she laid down next to the hearth in the ashes. Because she was always dirty with ashes and dust, they gave her the name Cinderella. Now, the time came when the king of the land announced a ball. It was to last, in all splendor, for 3 days, and there his son, the prince, would choose a wife for himself. The 2 proud sisters were invited. "Cinderella," they cried, "come here. Comb our hair, brush our shoes, and tighten our laces. We are going to the prince's ball." Cinderella did the best that she could, but they rewarded her only with curses. When they were ready, they said with scorn, "Cinderella, wouldn't you like to go to the ball?" "Oh, yes, but how can I go? I don't have a dress." "No," said the oldest one, "and we would be ashamed if you were to be seen there, and people learned that you are our sister. You belong in the kitchen. Here is a basin of lentils. Sort the good ones from the bad ones, and if there is a single bad one in the lot, when we return, you can expect the worst." With that, they left. Cinderella stood and watched until she could no longer see them. Then she sadly went into the kitchen and spread the lentils out over the hearth. There was a very, very large pile of them. Cinderella sighed. I'll have to sit here sorting lentils until midnight. And I can't close my eyes, no matter how much they hurt." She thought on the words her mother so lovingly told her before dying. "I will help you in time of need. Just remain pious and good." But just how more good and how more pious would she have to be for her mother to help her in such a time of need? Feeling abandoned by the death of her parents, Cinderella knelt down in the ashes next to the hearth and was about to begin her work when 2 white doves flew in through the window. They sat at the hearth next to the lentils. Nodding their heads, they said, "Cinderella, do you want us to help you sort the lentils?" "Grateful," she answered, "yes. The bad ones go into your crop. The good ones go into the pot." And peck, 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 they started at once, eating up the bad ones and leaving the good ones lying. In only a quarter of an hour, there was not a single bad lentil among the good ones, and she brushed them all into the pot. "Would you like to see your sisters dancing with the prince?" the doves asked. "Yes, but how?" The doves flew over to the kitchen sink, filled with dirty dishwater. "Just look in," they said. Intrigued, Cinderella peered into the muddy water until it cleared, revealing her sisters dancing with the handsome prince. Everything glistened with the glow of 1,000 lights until it felt as though she had been dancing with the prince himself. Mesmerized, she stared into the dirty dishwater for hours, until, with a heavy heart, she laid down in the ashes and fell asleep. The next morning, the 2 sisters came to the kitchen. They were angry when they saw that she had sorted the lentils, for they wanted to scold her. Because they could not, they began telling her about the ball. They said, "Cinderella, it was so grand at the ball. The prince, who is the best-looking man in the whole world, escorted us, and he is going to choose one of us to be his wife." "Yes," said Cinderella, "I saw the glistening lights. It must have been magnificent." "Now just how did you do that?" asked the oldest one. Aware she had spoken too soon, and no one would believe she had watched the entire ball from the dishwater in the sink, Cinderella had to think quickly. By climbing up to the pigeon roost, she replied. When the eldest heard this, her envy drove her to have the pigeon roost torn down immediately. Once again, Cinderella had to comb their hair and get them ready. Before the sisters left, the youngest said, "Here is a sack full of seeds. Sort the good ones from the bad ones, and do it well. If tomorrow there are any bad ones in the lot, then I will dump the whole sacksful into the ashes, and you will have to go without eating until you have picked them all out again." Cinderella sadly sat down on the hearth and spread out the seeds. The doves flew in again and said, "Cinderella, do you want us to help you sort the seeds?" "Yes," she answered. "The bad ones go into your crop, the good ones go into the pot." Peck, 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 peck. It went as fast as if 12 hands were at work. When they were finished, the doves said, "Cinderella, would you like to go dancing at the ball?" "Oh my goodness," she said. "How could I go in these dirty clothes?" "Just go to the little tree on your mother's grave, shake it, and wish yourself some beautiful clothes. But come back before midnight." So Cinderella went and shook the little tree and said, shake yourself, little tree. Throw some nice clothing down to me." She had scarcely spoken these words when a splendid silver dress fell down before her. With it were pearls, silk stockings with silver decorations, silver slippers, and everything else that she needed. Cinderella carried it all home. After she had washed herself and put on the beautiful clothing, she was as beautiful as a rose washed in dew. She went to the front door, and there was a carriage with 6 black horses, all decorated with feathers, and servants dressed in blue and silver. They helped her into the carriage, and away they galloped to the king's castle. The prince saw the carriage stop before the gate, and thought that a foreign princess was arriving. He himself walked down the steps, helped Cinderella out, and escorted her into the hall. Many thousand lights shone upon her, and she was so beautiful that everyone there was amazed. The sisters stood there, angry that someone was more beautiful than they were, but they had no idea that it was Cinderella, who they thought was lying at home in the ashes. The prince danced with Cinderella and paid her every royal honor. He thought to himself, I am supposed to choose myself a bride. I will have no one but her. However long she had suffered in ashes and sorrow, Cinderella was now living in splendor and joy. As midnight approached, before the clock struck 12, she stood up, bowed, and said that she had to go, in spite of the prince's requests for her to stay. The prince escorted her out. Her carriage stood there waiting for her, and she rode away just as splendidly as she had come. Back at home, Cinderella returned to the tree on her mother's grave and said, shake yourself, little tree. Take the clothing back from me." The tree took back the clothes. Cinderella put on her old ash dress again, went home, dirtied her face, and lay down in the ashes to sleep. The next morning, the two sisters came in looking out of sorts, and without saying a word. Cinderella said, "Did you have a good time yesterday evening?" "No. A princess was there who danced with the prince almost the whole time, but no one knew who she was nor where she came from." "Was she the one in the splendid carriage drawn by 6 black horses?" asked Cinderella. "How did you know that?" "I was standing in the front door when she rode by the house." "What were you doing, standing in the front door?" said the oldest one, giving Cinderella an evil look. "In the future, do not leave your work." Cinderella had to get her sisters ready a third time. Her reward was a basin filled with peas, which she was supposed to sort. "And do not dare to leave your work," shouted the oldest one as she was leaving. Cinderella thought, "If only my doves will come again," and her heart beat a little faster. The doves did come, just as they had the evening before, and said, "Cinderella, would you like us to help you sort the peas?" "Yes," she said. "The bad ones go into your crop. The good ones go into the pot." Once again, the doves picked out the bad ones, and soon they were finished. Then they said, "Cinderella, shake the little tree, and it will throw down even more beautiful clothes. Go to the ball, but be careful to come back before midnight." Cinderella went and said, shake yourself, little tree. Throw some nice clothing down to me." Then a dress fell down that was even more magnificent and more splendid than the other one, made entirely of gold and precious stones. With it were stockings decorated with gold and slippers made of gold. Cinderella put them on, and she glistened like the sun at midday. A carriage with 6 white horses pulled up at the door. The horses had tall white plumes on their heads, and the servants were dressed in red and gold. When Cinderella arrived, the prince was waiting for her at the stairway. He escorted her into the hall. If everyone had been astounded at her beauty yesterday, today they were even more astounded. The sisters stood in the corner, pale with envy. If they had known that this was Cinderella, who they thought was at home lying in the ashes, they would have died of jealousy. The prince wanted to know who the foreign princess was, where she was from, and where she was going. He placed his people in the street to keep watch. To prevent her from running away so fast, he had the stairway covered with pitch. Cinderella danced with the prince again and again. Filled with joy, she did not think about midnight. Suddenly, in the middle of a dance, she heard the clock strike. She suddenly remembered what the doves had warned her. Frightened, she rushed to the door and ran down the stairs. Because they were covered with pitch, one of her gold slippers stuck fast, and in her fear she did not think to pick it up. She reached the last step just as the clock struck 12. The carriage and the horses disappeared, and Cinderella was left standing there in the dark street dressed in her ash clothes. The prince had rushed after her. He found the golden slipper on the stairway, pulled it loose, and picked it up. But by the time he arrived below, she had disappeared. The people whom he had ordered to keep watch came and said that they had seen nothing. Cinderella was glad that it had not been worse. She returned home, lit her simple oil lamp, hung it in the chimney, and lay down in the ashes. Before long the two sisters returned and called out, "Cinderella, get up and light the way for us." Cinderella acted as though she had been asleep. While lighting their way, she heard one of them say, "God knows who the cursed princess is. I wish that she were lying beneath the earth." The prince danced only with her, and after she left, he did not want to stay any longer, and the whole party came to an end. "It was as though they suddenly blew out all the lights," said the other one. Cinderella knew exactly who the foreign princess was, but she did not say a word. Now the prince decided that since nothing else had succeeded, he would let the slipper help him find his bride. He had it proclaimed that he would marry the person whose foot fit the gold slipper. But it was too small for everyone. Indeed, some could not have gotten their foot inside if it had been twice as large. Finally, it came time for the two sisters to try on the slipper. They were happy, for they had small, beautiful feet, and each one believed that she could not fail. If only the prince would come here sooner, they thought. "Listen," said the mother secretly. "Take this knife, and if the slipper is too tight, just cut off part of your foot. It will hurt a little, but what harm is that? The pain will soon pass, and then one of you will be queen." Then the oldest one went to her bedroom and tried on the slipper. The front of her foot went in, but her heel was too large, so she took the knife and cut part of it off so she could force her foot into the slipper. Then she went out to the prince, and when he saw that she was wearing the slipper, he said that she was to be his bride. He escorted her to his carriage and was going to drive away with her. When he arrived at the gate, the two doves were perched above, and they called out, "Coo, coo, there's blood in the shoe. The shoe is too tight. This bride is not right." The prince bent over and looked at the slipper. Blood was streaming from it. He saw that he had been deceived, and he took the false bride back. The mother then said to her second daughter, "Take the slipper, and if it is too short for you, then cut off your toes." So she took the slipper into her bedroom, and because her foot was too long, she bit her teeth together and cut off a large part of her toes, then quickly pulled on the slipper. When she stepped out wearing it, the prince thought that she was the right one and wanted to ride away with her. But when they came to the gate, the doves again called out, "Coo, coo, there's blood in the shoe. The shoe is too tight. This bride is not right." The prince looked down and saw that her white stockings were stained red, and that blood had come up high on them. The prince took her back to her mother and said, "She is not the right bride either. Is there not another daughter here in this house?" "No," said the mother. "There is only a dirty cinder girl here. She is sitting down there in the ashes. The slipper would never fit her." She did not want to call her, but the prince insisted. So they called Cinderella, but she didn't answer. Cinderella knew the prince was there, but she was ashamed. The night before, while she dreamt of her time with the prince at the ball, her stepmother had grown suspicious and had cut off all of Cinderella's hair. They called again, but she wouldn't answer until the prince himself had gone into the kitchen where she sat crying in the ashes. "Your Grace," she said, wiping the tears and bowing her head. The prince handed her the gold slipper and said, "Please, try it on. If it fits you, you shall be my wife." She put her foot into the slipper, pushing ever so slightly. It fit, as if it had been poured over her foot. As she straightened herself up, she was instantly transformed into the true princess she had always been. Humbled, the prince whispered, "This is the right bride," and bowed before her. The stepmother and the two proud sisters turned pale with horror as the prince escorted Cinderella away. He helped her into his carriage, and as they rode through the gate, the doves called out, "Coo, coo. No blood's in the shoe. The shoe's not too tight. This bride is just right." And as for the wicked stepmother and her two prideful daughters, in the end, they all got what they deserved.